was 2012 and I was only 8 years old. The sky over Mexico City turned completely black before 6:30 in the evening. A heavy storm was coming in fast. The wind was already howling between the houses, and the first thunder shook the air like something angry. My mother and my aunt had to go to an important work meeting, so they left me, my older brother and my older sister at my aunt's house. My cousin, who was in university, was supposed to watch us. That house had always felt wrong. Everyone in the family knew it. My cousin used to tell us stories about voices calling from empty rooms and shadows that moved when no one was looking. That evening, those stories stopped being funny. My brother and sister decided to run to the little store on the corner to buy snacks because we were hungry. They left me with one job: go to the backyard and take down all the clothes hanging on the line before the rain started. I went outside carrying the big plastic basket. The wind was so strong it almost ripped the shirts from my hands. I worked as fast as I could, but there was a lot of laundry. My fingers were freezing, and the thunder kept getting louder. When I finally dragged the heavy basket back inside and closed the back door, the house felt different. The silence was heavy. My cousin was 2 floors up in his room, and I could barely hear him. The only light came from the television in the living room, paused on a scene from Ice Age 4. Everything else was sinking into darkness. I left the basket on the floor and walked to the couch. My heart was already beating too fast. The air felt thick, like something was watching me. I sat down and tried to focus on the frozen image on the screen, but the fear kept growing. Then, from inside the kitchen, I heard a voice whisper my name. It was soft, almost gentle, but it made every hair on my body stand up. I froze. For a second I thought I had imagined it. Then the voice came again, a little louder. It called me to come. It said they were there. It told me to come closer so it could see me. My stomach turned. Part of me wanted to run out the front door screaming, but another part believed it was my sister and brother playing a trick on me. They had been gone for a while, and the rain was getting worse. Maybe they had sneaked back in through the back to scare me. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak. The floor creaked under my feet as I walked toward the kitchen. The voice kept whispering, saying things I couldn't fully understand because of the loud rain. Then I started hearing laughter. Soft giggles at first, like someone trying to hold back a laugh. The giggles grew stronger, more excited, until they sounded nothing like my brother or sister. They sounded wrong. Too eager, too hungry. I reached the kitchen door. It was old heavy wood with a cold metal handle. I was only a few centimeters away. My hand was shaking badly. I could feel cold air leaking from under the door. The giggles were right there on the other side, mixed with more whispers of my name. My fingers were trembling so badly that I could barely keep them on the cold metal handle. The air coming from under the door felt unnaturally cold, like it was blowing straight from a freezer. I could almost feel it wrapping around my ankles, climbing up my legs. My breathing was shallow and fast. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to run, but my feet stayed planted there, as if something was holding me in place. I kept thinking about how the voice had sounded exactly like my sister at first. That sweet, familiar tone she used when she wanted me to come play with her. But the more I listened, the more wrong it felt. The whispers were becoming faster, more insistent, overlapping with those horrible little giggles that kept growing louder. It sounded like there was more than one voice now, like several small things were laughing together at some private joke I wasn't allowed to understand. The rain outside was falling harder, beating against the roof like thousands of tiny fists. The sound should have made me feel safe, but instead it made the kitchen feel even more isolated, like the rest of the world had disappeared, and only this door and whatever was behind it existed. I leaned my head slightly closer to the wood, trying to hear better. My ear was only inches away. The giggles turned into something almost breathless, excited, like whatever was there could barely contain itself. One of the whispers came through clearer than the others. It repeated my name slowly, dragging out the syllables in a way no child would ever do. My mind was racing. What if my brother and sister really were playing a trick? What if they had gone around the back somehow? But deep down, I knew it wasn't them. The house felt too empty, too quiet except for that door. My cousin was still upstairs. I hadn't heard him come down once. Just as my fingers started to press down on the handle, ready to push it open, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. Real footsteps, shoes wet from the rain squeaking on the tile floor. My brother's voice complaining loudly about how soaked they were, and my sister laughing at him for stepping in a puddle. Normal, real, human. The moment those sounds reached the hallway, everything behind the kitchen door stopped. The whispers vanished. The giggles cut off mid-breath. Complete silence, as if nothing had ever been there. I yanked my hand away from the handle so fast I almost fell backward. My legs felt like they had turned to water. I spun around and ran toward the front of the house as fast as my small legs could carry me. My heart was pounding so violently I could feel it in my throat, in my ears, everywhere. I crashed straight into my sister, wrapping my arms around her waist and burying my face in her shirt. I was shaking uncontrollably, tears already streaming down my cheeks even though I tried to hold them back. Between sobs, I told them everything, how the voice had called my name, how it sounded just like her at first, how it kept telling me to come closer, and especially those awful giggles that didn't sound like any person I knew. They both looked at me with wide eyes, then at each other. My sister swore they had only just gotten back from the store. The rain had been so heavy they had to wait under a small awning for several minutes so they wouldn't get completely drenched. They insisted they had never come through the back door, never entered the kitchen, never called me once. My cousin heard the commotion and came running down the stairs. We told him the whole story. He didn't laugh or tease me like he usually did. His face went serious. Without saying much, he walked straight to the kitchen, flipped on the light switch, and slowly pushed the door open. I stayed back, peeking from the hallway with my brother and sister. The bright light flooded the kitchen. There was nothing there. No one hiding behind the counter. No one under the table. The room was completely empty, cold and still. Just the faint smell of old tiles mixed with the wet scent of rain coming through the small window above the sink. The door to the backyard was still locked from the inside. That night, the storm became much worse. The rain turned into a torrential downpour, and lightning flashed almost constantly. No one wanted to leave the house in that weather, so we all stayed over. My cousin gave me his own room upstairs on the second floor, saying it would be safer and farther away from the kitchen. I tried to feel grateful, but the fear had already settled deep inside my chest. I lay in his bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every creak in the old house made me jump. Every gust of wind against the windows sounded like whispering. Whenever I closed my eyes, those giggles echoed in my head, excited, breathless, hungry. I kept wondering what would have happened if those few extra seconds had passed. What if I had turned the handle? What if I had opened the door and stepped inside? Sometime deep in the madrugada, long after midnight, a massive crack of thunder jolted me awake. It was so loud it felt like the whole house shook. Rain was hammering the roof so violently it sounded like stones being thrown. I was lying on the top bunk of the old wooden bed that faced the large window overlooking the patio and the neighbor's roof next door. Another bright flash of lightning lit up the entire room for a split second, turning everything white. And that's when I saw the figure. A small child, no older than 8 or 9, was running across the wet, slippery tiles of the neighbor's roof. It wore what looked like a primary school uniform, a white shirt stuck to its thin body and dark shorts. Its feet were bare, slapping loudly against the roof with every step. The rain was pouring down heavily, but the child didn't seem bothered by it at all. I thought at first it had to be a dream, or maybe some kid doing something stupid. But then another lightning bolt illuminated the sky and the figure suddenly stopped running. It turned its head very slowly toward our house and looked directly at my window. My blood ran cold. I quickly pulled the thin old sheet over my head, but the fabric was worn out and half transparent. I could still see the silhouette clearly through it. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard it actually hurt. The child on the roof just stood there, completely still now, staring straight at me. Rain streamed down its face and clothes, but it didn't move, didn't blink, didn't shiver. After a few moments, it started moving again. It climbed down the side of the neighbor's house, using the metal fence like it was nothing, dropping silently into the patio below. Its movements were too smooth, too quiet for a normal child in the middle of a storm. A moment later, I saw its small shadow pass by the window of the room where my parents would have slept if they were there. Then it turned and walked straight toward my window. It stopped right in front of the glass, only a few centimeters away. Its face was pale, unnaturally pale, and glistening with rain. The eyes were large and dark, too dark, like two empty holes. It just stood there, head tilted slightly to one side, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. It looked like it was studying me, memorizing every detail. I tried to make noise under the sheet, shifting my body, pretending I was about to wake up, hoping it would get scared and run away. But it didn't care. It stayed perfectly still, watching. Those 10 minutes felt like hours. The only sounds in the world were the heavy rain beating on the roof and my own ragged, terrified breathing trapped under the thin fabric. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, another bright flash of lightning lit up the patio. The child turned slowly, climbed back up the fence with the same unnatural ease, reached the roof again, and continued running until its small figure disappeared completely into the darkness and the pouring rain. I didn't close my eyes again for the rest of that night. I stayed there, sheet pulled tight around me, listening to every sound, terrified that if I looked toward the window, I would see that same pale face still staring back at me. The next morning, I told my cousin everything I had seen on the roof and at the window. He listened quietly, his face pale. When I finished, he just said in a low voice that this house had always attracted things that seemed especially interested in children. To this day, more than 10 years later, I still don't know what was behind that kitchen door. I don't know if the thing that whispered my name and laughed with those horrible giggles was the same entity that stood outside my window later that night, watching me with those empty black eyes. But every time a strong storm hits at night, when the rain hammers the roof and thunder shakes the windows, I still wake up with my heart racing. I lie there in the dark, afraid to look toward any window, convinced that if I do, something small wearing a soaked school uniform will be standing there again, waiting patiently, watching me. And the question that has haunted me ever since that night still echoes in my mind. What was waiting for me behind that kitchen door? And what would have happened if I had actually opened it?